Credential stuffing. I want to talk today about credential stuffing and where this activity or attack method is going. But first, before we do that, it would probably be helpful for me to kind of explain what credential stuffing is in case you don't know. And then we'll talk about how credential stuffing is kind of evolving and what businesses need to do to protect themselves and what individuals like you can also do to protect themselves. So, before we dive right in, I have an article pulled up here. Just a reminder. Please subscribe to my channel and also click like if you like this video. It helps me a lot. So, in this article here, we have by Kunal Anand. It's titled "The Evolving Threat of Credential Stuffing." And then the subtitle says bots swerve to focus on APIs means businesses must take the threat seriously and take effective action. So, the overall idea here, which I also want to, talk about is that businesses are doing plenty to try to stop credential stuffing attacks. Like I mentioned before, it's an extremely common attack. There are plenty of tools that companies have implemented to protect themselves and you ultimately from these types of attacks. But what's interesting, what's evolving, is that as businesses protect themselves from these credential stuffing attacks on the front end, let's say, they are not as focused on protecting the APIs that make up the back end. And as a result, attackers have now kind of pivoted to focusing on attacking APIs or the back end of the application in order to basically be more successful because there's just less hoops to jump through and less defense there. So, with that being said, in this article here, it says that Gartner predicts that by 2022, API abuses will become the most common attack vector, resulting in data breaches. So there you have it, right? Gartner's saying that even though despite growing awareness of API security, the breaches are continuing to occur, and businesses essentially need to beef up their API security. So that's the idea there. But overall, or rather, what I'd like to kind of explain here is what a typical, and they do it so in this article, so it's easy to reference, what a typical credential stuffing attack looks like. Right? They break it down into 3 steps. Step 1, steal some credentials, right? Credentials are widely available from breach sites on the dark web. So when a breach happens, usually the credentials are bought and sold on the dark web. If you don't know about it, there's tons of these like dump sites where they basically just dump credentials. And then what you end up with is lists of usernames and passwords, or sometimes they're called combo lists. And then once you've obtained, or once an attacker or hacker has obtained these lists or these combinations of usernames or passwords, the next thing they need to do is check if any of them work, right? So just imagine just like knocking on a million doors and trying to open the lock on the door with your hand just to wiggle it a little to see if it opens, right? Well, that's kind of what they do next. They usually use software or a botnet to check these credentials against all different types of accounts, right? It could be basically any account with a login, right? So Dunkin' Donuts, they have a rewards program, right? Starbucks, any type of bank, obviously, right? Anything that you have a username or password to, an attacker will try to automate breaking into that with some username or password combination that they've tried, usually using an automated tool so they can try thousands and thousands at a time. And this is a very low-cost thing to do. There's tons of tools out there that attackers can get pretty much for free. And then, the last step is, if they do find a username and password that allows them to successfully log in, then they'll start stealing your personal information, your credit card numbers, your rewards points, and then they might also use your account to do other things like send spam or email, right? So there's plenty of examples of attacks like this that have happened. There's so many, it's crazy, but They mention here in this article Dunkin' Donuts and a Spanish soccer team, but there's plenty more. Just all you have to do is just look at any of these types of breaches that have been in the news, and a lot of them have come from credential stuffing types of attacks. So what you can do, and what you should do, knowing that these types of attacks exist, is make sure that you have two-factor authentication or password manager and multi-factor authentication. So that's going to make it one step harder for attackers to break into your account, because if they do guess your username and password, or if it's already been leaked on the dark web and they have it, if they don't have the ability to break in past your two-factor authentication, because they don't have your cell phone, they haven't done anything to SIM swap you or any of those other types of methods they would use to take it to basically have your cell phone or your text messages, for example, then they're not going to be able to completely break into your account. So highly recommend having multi-factor or two-factor authentication enabled. And then kind of the rest of the story for businesses is businesses need to recognize that attackers are taking these botnets and these tools, and they're now pointing them at the API rather than at the front end login, right? So the same defenses that are used on the front end need to start being used on the back end. In this article, the author mentions the way companies are operating right now is kind of like installing a fancy deadbolt with a state-of-the-art alarm system on your front door, but leaving the back door wide open. Nobody would do that, right? But many companies are making a similar mistake with their cybersecurity defenses. They put Fort Knox-like security on the front end of their apps and websites while leaving their back-end critical APIs exposed to the world. So that's pretty much what what I wanted to cover about credential stuffing here. So that please, individuals, use multi-factor authentication. Get an authenticator app like Google Authenticator. Use a password manager. Make sure that you're not reusing your passwords. And then on top of that, businesses need to recognize that this is the future. This is where attacks are going to be taking place. And Gartner is predicting by 2022 it will be the most common place that it gets attacked. So companies need to step up their cybersecurity activity, rather their cybersecurity defenses on their APIs. And if you don't know what an API is, I would suggest just kind of Googling it. But essentially, APIs are underlying every application that companies are using. It's a massive thing to manage at this point, but APIs are essentially what allow applications to talk to each other and authenticate credentials, and it's essentially a way to log into a program through the back end, and it needs to be protected just like we log into a program through the front end. So I'm David, and please, if you like this video, please click like. Also, please don't hesitate to subscribe. It helps me out a lot, like I mentioned. I also run a blog called cyberjitsu.blog. And thanks for your time, and I'll talk to you guys soon.